Welcome to Conversations with Yogis. I'm joined by Daniela Simina once again, and she was kindly enough to accept a second conversation here with me. And so I'm here in Santiago. She's in Atlanta, and through the magic of Skype, we are able to communicate and have an intelligent conversation in real time. So, we just talked previously about discussing asana today and really honing in and focusing in on the physical practices of yoga. Doing some work with some students right now and really finding myself lacking in sort of the um, historical context of asana, where it all started, why it started. Um, and I find myself having difficulty answering my students' questions about, well, gosh, if the Yoga Sutras barely even mentions asana, why are we even doing it, or why is it such a huge part of the modern practice? And oftentimes I don't have the best answers to those questions. So um, I wanted to sort of pick your brain today about maybe a little bit about the history of it, but really just starting off, why you think it's such a vital, the physical practice, why you think the physical practice is such a vital foundation for the quote-unquote higher practices of, pranayama, mantra, meditation, and this sort of thing.
Hey Chris, I'm so happy to see you again. I'm delighted to be part of your conversations with the yogis again, so thank you for having me today. And what's been at the center of your attention as of recently in terms of asana practice has been on the center of my attention for a while. As I'm teaching students, newcomers to yoga, and most of them come with this idea that asana, as we see it and practice it today, it's been around for forever. And they're very surprised to find out that actually there's been a constant evolution in the asana practice, and this has gotten more sophisticated and more complex. And there are a few things I'd like to say about it. In first place, I see the evolution of the asana practice as a response to the needs that we do have in modern life. So think for one moment, what are the main activities that we are doing throughout the day? Sitting and walking. So these are very much single plane oriented movement. You only walk forward. It's not like any swinging side to side. It's barely any rotation, at the spine and pelvis going on there. So we tend to lose functionality within muscles and joints that our ancestors didn't have a problem with. I mean, they're far more active in their lifestyles. I mean, working in the field, farming, that was the main way of making for a living. So this is one aspect. So asana practice develops in response to this sense of lack that we have. So we come to the mat and we want to do more to become more flexible. And how on earth do you develop flexibility within your joints if not trying to move that joint through its full range of motion? And everyday driving won't take your joints through their full range of motion, so you find a way to compensate, for that through other kinds of physical activity. And this is just one aspect. You also look for core strengthening, but what's core strengthening achieved in a more dynamic and more balanced way. So it's not just core strengthening, and many people have this misconception, core reduced as reducing the notion of core to just abdominals. And you go there and you do hundreds of crunches a day, and then you realize that you're still imbalanced and your posture still lacks. And much as abdominals is, working your abdominals is very important, core is not reducible to just crunches. So we come to yoga practice and think to the asana, and you get an understanding and an experience of the physical core. First through seated position and standing position in proper alignment, engaging at a very subtle level groups of muscles, and then in a dynamic way as you go through the posture and preserve that alignment. And because movement is done really slow paced and the pacing is dictated by the breath, you have a chance to dive into your body and connect to your own body at levels that you don't have otherwise. The competition aspect is taken out of the equation. So the only focus and the only interest is that on the process itself. And here is the beauty. And you end up developing this posture awareness and that core strength without, it's kind of almost like a side effect, it's like bonus material what you're getting from your practice. I'd like to go back a little bit to the history of it because, as you said, Yoga Sutras refers to asana in just one line, so whole, bunch of sutras, and the only mention of the asana is the steadiness of the mind and relaxation of the effort is the perfection of the asana. So it's not the grinding of the teeth, it's not the sweating bullets, is not balancing on one finger, so there's not no detail given in any of these directions. Relaxation of the effort, I think, is very important, and we experience this in asana when we are told by our teachers, and we as teachers tell our students, engage but don't clench within the pose. So whatever the pose, where you are seated, whether you're standing, whether you are doing a simple yet so complex warrior two, where you mind the alignment of all parts and you seek depth of posture to really get those muscles to fire a little bit. I mean, if there's no change, there's no growth. If there's no challenge, there's no growth. So you create the change within your posture by increasing intensity gradually. Yet all these things are done in a state of complete awareness and relaxation of the mind and relaxation of the breath. I cannot dissociate, breath from posture, because even if we don't go like specific pranayama techniques that we practice independently and seated, breath is present all the way through. And the moment you start holding the breath and clenching, I mean, the two go hand in hand. The moment you see the student biting his or her lips and really tightening up, they're holding their breath. So there's right away a dissociation in between breath and posture. There's this dichotomy in between, that there is clenching, and there is no relaxation of the effort. So having the steadiness and the fluidity of breath is basically the expression of this relaxation of the effort within the asana. Going even farther back in time, the yoga, the Shiva Samhita actually mentions, I guess, 11 or 13 postures. And those were fundamental in preparing the body for the practice of meditation. But there are specific health benefits associated with those postures, and Shiva Samhita and Geranda Samhita do a really good job in describing those benefits, like extending the life, and the breath flows smoothly, which when I was reading about it's like, all kind of cardiovascular disease and all the kind of allergies and asthma that we are experiencing nowadays. So they weren't in fashion back then, but nonetheless, the poses were there to enhance our immune system and to enhance our breathing capacity and to work on our nervous system. And as I said, from 11 postures, that would have been enough, for those people back then who were also very active in their lifestyle. We have expanded to cover more and more for our legs, and we have much more sophistication in our asana practice. But we still have breathing and posture brought together to create the foundation, to create the basis for meditation. Now, nowadays, as it was 5,000 years ago, it's just a matter of packaging, The essence, the gift is the same. Meditation is related, to the nervous system. I mean, that's the main prerequisite, if not the only prerequisite for a human being to meditate is the possessing of a nervous system. And the nervous system, just think neuromuscular unit. You cannot dissociate it from the rest, from the physical body. You have neurons that are connected to muscles. So as we work with the muscles, we stimulate the nervous system, and processing information at the central nervous system, we deliver the messages to the body, and then we have motor responses and endocrine responses and so on. So it is really important. I have in mind Swami Rama of the Himalayas, and he emphasizes throughout his work the importance of a healthy body and strong body in order to face the challenges of a spiritual practice. And Master BKS Iyengar emphasizes in a number of places, and he was a living example of longevity in his practice and everything, how important it is for spiritual progress to really maintain a healthy, strong, flexible body. Because wherever sickness arises, it's not that sickness will completely prevent you from being, a spiritual seeker and, from becoming an enlightened person or anything, but it is a big hindrance. And for us, as I'm seeing myself, still in the mind of the beginner, and still as a beginner, on this path, I'm barely scraping the surface. I'm barely learning the ABCs. If, God forbid, I'm getting some major disease, some major health problem, of course, this is going to detract resources from my quest, from moving forward on this path. And I don't want this to happen. Therefore, I'm going to pay attention to the physical body. And everything we're doing in asana works toward, done mindlessly. We see a lot of things that are kind of pushing the limits and testing the limits. And I know there's a place for that too, but like at a the householder, the average person who really wants to, to go to yoga and benefit from it health-wise and spiritually. We really need that component, that physical component, because while working with the physical, we stimulate the circulation. Just put it very simple, use the muscles to stimulate the circulation. And by so doing, you enhance the functioning of your nervous system. There's more oxygenated blood flowing to your brain, just basic thing. We work with pranayama. Well, pranayama regulates the activity of the nervous system because the way nerve plexuses are connected to the diaphragm and to your spine and to different major organs and energetic centers, within the body. So working with the body, we touch more than just one level, and I think it's really important to create that support to further progress into yoga.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love everything you just said. I want to go back and ask you a question about, so you were talking about how the neurons are actually attached to muscle tissue and how different movements and whatnot can have an effect on the nervous system. Do you know anything about, how actual stretching of the muscles, releasing tension in the muscles, actually affects the neurons, which have an effect on the overall nervous system?
Yes. I have a number of things to say about it. It's a beautiful question, and it kind of got my mind and my attention over the past years. I would like to start with the idea of the myofascia. So this is connective tissue, and it wraps around the muscles. And it is the richest innervated tissue that the human body has. Myofascia is extremely rich in nerve endings. And by so doing, it absorbs a tremendous amount of information. Now we know that information is energy. Information is not like sand that you're pouring, into a cup and you hold it there. Information is energy. And our bodies store energy, whether positive, you replenish your resources and you keep going, or builds up stagnation and that kind of dense field. And the process of storaging is preceded by that of receiving, recepting, and then not being able, to dispose to it, kind of disintegrate and release it. So we absorb a lot through our sense organs. We are kinesthetic beings. We absorb and experience a lot through movement. In anger, our muscles will tighten and clench. In joy and happiness, there's going to be a release and then relaxation of everything, and all those things get stored in. Now, post-traumatic stress gets stored a whole lot in the tissues, and oftentimes develop into more serious pathology. And this is why many people, they get to yoga, they start stretching, and all of a sudden things start shifting around. They don't necessarily have an understanding, about the energy and and many of them don't even care, when they get started. They start caring much later,
Yeah, of course.
But again, they don't typically care much about it. But as we work and we stretch the muscles are wrapped. Every single bundle of muscle fibers, they're wrapped in myofascia, and it's everywhere. So as you stretch the muscle, you stretch, release the myofascia. As you fold and compress and engage, you do stimulate that myofascia that's adhering to the muscle. So pent up energy in those areas start dissolving, start moving. And while we do dissolve that clusters, and the experience, it's not always pleasant. It may come up like emotional releases. You are in pigeon pose and students start crying, and you tell them it's okay. Issues are in the tissues. You're just having a release of who knows what that need to come up.
Issues are in the tissues.
Yes, issues.
Relation hips.
Yes, it's like the medical community coined the term, so I'm not taking credit for it.
No, these fly around yoga studios all the time. I love them though.
Yes. So you work through this stretching and gentle compression, and then stretching again and gentle compression. What we work is with myofascia and nerve endings and information that's been stored at that level for who knows how long, and now it's being released. So this is one of the primary aspects that comes to my mind. And there's also the aspect of pain receptors located in various parts in the body. I mean, in all the muscles, you have the anatomy. Will tell you about the Golgi organ, which is kind of the pain a receptor, and it sends the brain to the brain the signal for the muscle to contract, because pain is exceeding a certain threshold and it threatens rupturing of the fibers. So what happens at times, our muscle becomes so tight and so painful, and there's this overstimulation of these pain receptors in the body that keep firing, to the brain, and with all the neurochemicals and hormones being released, it makes us feel uncomfortable. We don't feel happy. And when you get into gentle stretching, you actually change the dynamic of what's going on in that muscle. So that pain receptor doesn't receive all the time the stimulation, fire, keep it contracting, because otherwise I'm going to break, which is wrong, which is messed up situation. So this is when release starts happening and people feel better. I mean, when you don't have a neck pain anymore, of course you feel better than when you're having it.
And you can meditate much easier as well.
Absolutely. Back to the idea of asana as preparation for meditation. How easy it is, to sit and meditate in proper posture when your hips don't hurt, when your knees don't hurt, when your back doesn't hurt, when your cervical spine is nice and in alignment. Of course, then you can sit and meditate. Otherwise, this is a torture. Just being there and pains and aches. That's not the blissful state.
And of course, you and I have a mutual teacher in common, Graham Fowler. One of the things that I had been introduced to yoga, been doing some yoga for about 10 years and whatnot, even teaching a little prior to meeting him and taking some trainings with him. But I didn't really fully understand the balance of the different practices as far as, the importance of doing the asana, the pranayama, the chanting, and the meditation, and the study of texts and scriptures. We need to do all of these things, but within a proper balance.
Absolutely.
And so and he talks or used to talk sometimes about people he knew that were just meditators, and they never did any asana, and he would describe them as being very sort of airy and just kind of spaced out. Or likewise, the other end of the spectrum is people that, and there's lots of these people, obviously, that only do asana and don't have any type of meditation practice, and sometimes these are your more, I guess, pitta types, sort of very athletic, can be a bit aggressive, and sometimes a little bit too in their bodies, and too body conscious, as it were, and sort of ego identified. And likewise, people that they do the yoga and they do a little meditation, but then they eat like crap, for example, and they don't follow a healthy diet, and so it's funny. Yesterday, I had the teacher training yesterday, and one of my students was talking about this workshop that he went to this pineal gland activation workshop, which is just like this, two-day little workshop you go to, and you're supposed to have your pineal gland activated, and I just thought that was
okay. It sounds interesting.
sure. But what I was trying to explain is, I've read books about yogis that meditate. You mentioned Swami Rama. I mean, he talks about in his book Living with the Himalayan Masters. It was, which is a fantastic book. Folks that are going to watch this haven't read that. That's sort of one of the penultimate modern yogic texts in my estimation, along with Autobiography of Yogi and some others. But at any rate, he talks in there about how he meditated with all these enlightened masters in the Himalayan caves. I mean, the real deal. And it was 17 years before he had a samadhi experience. And so I'm just thinking to myself, here, these people that are attending this pineal gland activation workshop, I'm just imagining like the somebody just, eating a bunch of hamburgers and drinking a bunch of beer, the week leading up to it, and then just like showing up and wanting to have their pineal gland activated and be enlightened. And it's so unrealistic. And so what I was trying to explain to him is that, my gosh, there's some prep work involved. It's like I used to work I managed a restaurant when I was much younger, and and a lot of people don't know that the cooks and the chefs show up like 2 or 3 hours most oftentimes before the restaurant even opens, to do all the prep work that has to be done before you open the restaurant and you can actually cook and serve the food. And it doesn't just magically appear on its own volition. There's preparation involved. And so I think of asana, especially asana, as that prep work and the preparation for what's to come. I mean, I think about Swami Rama, 17 years doing all these things, and that's common, actually. The more you research and the more you look into it, I mean, it's a lot of these yogis, they meditate for years and years and years, 30, 40 years before they actually have any type of meaningful experience. That's not always the case, obviously. Some people wake up like that. But it is quite common for it to take a long. It says in the Yoga Sutras in a couple of very important verses, yoga takes a long time. So I think of asana as this preparation work, and how important is it to instill that into the average yoga student who's maybe is just beginning to think about the sort of higher spiritual aspects of yoga. How important is it for you as like a yoga instructor to sort of instill this idea of preparation of the nervous system and the brain for the higher states of consciousness?
It is very important. It's like explaining children that before writing a story and being able, to write a beautiful composition, they need to learn the ABCs,
Yes.
And you don't just sit there, get a pen in your hand, and start random scribbling on the paper, hoping that coherent, beautiful writing is going to happen. You really need to know the letters. And mastery of the letters involves mastery of very basic fine motor skills, like holding that pencil and then doing the shapes on paper. So as I'm working with my students, especially those who are completely newcomers to yoga, and they've heard numerous things, beautiful things about yoga, and they're eager for experiences and to see themselves really basically from being relieved from anxiety and fears, to get a better sense of who they are and learn to understand themselves better, as well as making progress physically in different directions, like managing eating habits and then losing weight, or alleviating injury due to some accident or anything like this. And for all of them, with no exception, what I have to say is that the body is our laboratory and our instruments for learning. We have the senses, we have this beautiful infrastructure, and then we are all hardwired, for higher experiences. But the process doesn't just happen overnight. So we have to train the senses, and the way we train the senses is through physical practice. We also train ourselves and train the body and perfect the body through study. You relate your practice to studying of concepts. You don't have to take a deep dive in yogic texts, but just what I would say should be a mainstay in every yoga practitioner life would be the studying of what Yoga Sutras define as yamas and the niyamas. And you look at those, and you're going to get lessons about moderation and about taking good care of yourself and not being brutally violent with yourselves and others, and importance of study, like learning from what previous generations of yogis have to share and what modern generations of yogis have to share, to the beauty of letting go and let it be, and surrender and have trust in the force that runs this universe, and live your life in alignment to that, because this is when you really ride the wave and you don't get underneath. And all this, coupled with your asana practice, really sets you on a good foundation to live a healthy, fulfilling life. And I'm telling them there are no shortcuts. And depending, on the amount of effort and dedication they put into it and how serious they're taking their practice, this is how the results will show up. And some people need to work a little bit more than others, depending on what they're addressing. And pretty much this is it. There's no easy way, but the way is very pleasant, it's very interesting. And the reward is... I don't have words to quantify it or compare it to anything. I'm letting my students know that the bottom line is not just getting leaner and trimmer and stronger and more flexible, and breathe better and regulate our cholesterol levels and, and lower our heart rate and cope with stress and no longer suffer from anxiety. These are all great, great things to have in your life. But it's also through this practice, we want to really learn, understand who we are. We are in this world intended to express ourselves as ourselves. Okay, that's not random that you were christened. I'm Daniela. And our students are who they are. And there is uniqueness in each of us, and each of us expresses himself and herself in a unique way. And through this practice, starting with the physical, going deeper and deeper in, you get to know that essence. You get to have glimpses of what you really need to be and how you want to put yourself out there in a way that you live at your happiest and most fulfilling. And by so doing, you can offer and give and enrich the life of others as well. You cannot be miserable and crappy on your own and shower bliss and happiness around you. It just doesn't go like this.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think what you're referring to is this unique expression. Um, I think is what is often referred to as your dharma, and
Yep.
in Sanskrit, and of course that word I guess has another meaning for Buddhists, but certainly in the Hindu or the yoga tradition, it's being in your right place in life. And gosh, it took me a long a long time uh, to figure that one out, and or I guess to find what was my right place in life. I'm still working on it. I suppose we all are a bit, but it's interesting how much easier things flow in life, and how you attract timely and appropriate events and situations and people and things and places into your life when you are living dharmically, um, or living through that unique manifestation and expression that is you, at your core level.
Yes.
Um, and so I was just telling someone, yeah, I mean, they were asking me about that. They were asking me last week, a student, what's the difference between dharma and karma? And so I was trying to explain dharma as basically what you just said. I like the way you articulated that. It's like the unique expression that is you in this world. But when I was first introduced to meditation and some of these higher teachings, I had this erroneous notion that the personality had, the ego self, the personality, however you want to label that, really had no value. And while I still hold, while I can still accept the fact that it's not your highest self, and certainly there is this pure conscious layer, if you want to say that, of your being that is just a witness and a pure observer, that is your infinite self. That doesn't mean that there's no value to your finite self. And in all likelihood, I mean, let's face it, unless we're completely liberated in this incarnation, chances are we'll come back here, and we'll still have some of these samskaras, which are sort of these karmic seeds or your subconscious tendencies, really, that will again manifest into a unique form. And so I think it's important to embrace that uniqueness and the specialness of form, and to understand that is divine as well. And I guess in the yogic tradition, this would be called, the mother, whereas the pure consciousness aspect, or the Shiva, would be, father, the masculine aspect, or what have you. But they're both divine, aren't they? And so this is a wonderful way to bring this all full circle. So when we're dealing with, the flesh and the bones and the nerves and all these things in our asana practice, we are sort of worshiping at the feet of Divine Mother, are we not?
Absolutely. This is exactly the case. And if you look at yoga flourished from the tantric philosophy, from the tantric approach, which is very, very much body positive and life affirming, and it doesn't see the body as an encumbrance.
Or a prison.
Yes, the
I can't stand it when people say that.
That's the learning tool. This is what we have, to learn. And if you don't learn, you don't progress, you don't grow. And it is, speaking of, dharma and karma, I have in mind, and ego. I have in mind Master B.K.S. Iyengar and his quote about the ego. He says, ego should be your driving force, not the substitute for the soul. Because when you decide, I'm done with being sick, I'm done with being miserable, I want to be healthy, I want to be strong, to become strong, I want to make a difference in this world, and help people in need. That's still an ego-driven situation. I mean, it's your ego in seek for some affirmation, for some expression. But that can be a very healthy way, as long as it doesn't take completely over and allows for, there's still place for that letting go and let it be. As long as that ego is still the driving force that determines us, to become better teachers, determines us, to go there and step in front of our students, prepare to our best to share what we have to share and make a difference in their lives. As much as what the teachers has made ours. So at this point, ego has value, and it is an important aspect, it's part of expression. Of course, there are lessons to learn, and as we perfect ourselves, hopefully, from one incarnation to the next, then this is how we work through the general layout of our karma, burning some karmic debt, or maybe not adding some karmic debt, and we'll see where this goes.
Beautiful, thank you. Well said. Sorry about the dogs. We have a lot of dogs here, and they're pretty loud. We brought our dog with us from the States, and her family already had 4 dogs, so now there's 5 dogs living here in one yard, and it can be a little hectic, but it was just a super nice day, and I thought I would sit outside, but maybe that wasn't the best idea in the world. But anyway, I think that's an amazing stopping place for us, and I just thank you again so much for coming on with me here and being able to have an intelligent conversation about these issues. Dealing with asana really helps, me, really informs my personal practice, but also things that I can now share with my students. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste.
And really finding myself lacking in sort of the historical context of asana, where it all started, why it started, and I find myself having difficulty answering my students' questions about, well, gosh, if the Yoga Sutras barely even mentions asana, why are we even doing it, or why is it such a huge part of the modern practice? And oftentimes I don't have the best answers to those questions. So I wanted to sort of pick your brain today about maybe a little bit about the history of it, but really just starting off, why you think it's such a vital, the physical practice, why you think the physical practice is such a... Welcome to Conversations with Yogis. I'm joined by Daniela Simina once again, and she was kindly enough to accept a second conversation here with me. And so I'm here in Santiago, she's in Atlanta, and through the magic of Skype we are able to communicate and have an intelligent conversation in real time. So we just talked previously about discussing asana today, and really honing in and focusing in on the physical practices of yoga. Doing some work with some students right now.
In the asana practice, and this has gotten more sophisticated and more complex. And there are a few things I'd like to say about it. In first place, I see the evolution of the asana practice as a response to the needs that we do have in modern life. So think for one moment, what are the main activities that we are doing throughout the day? Sitting and walking. So these are very much single plane oriented movement. You only walk forward. It's not like any swinging side to side. It's barely any rotation, at the spine and pelvis going on there. So we tend to lose functionality within muscles and joints.
Vital foundation for the quote-unquote higher practices of, pranayama, mantra, meditation, and this sort of thing.
Hey Chris, I'm so happy to see you again. I'm delighted to be part of your conversations with the Yogis again, so thank you for having me today. And what's been at the center of your attention as of recently in terms of asana practice has been on the center of my attention for a while. As I'm teaching students, newcomers to yoga, and most of them come with this idea that asana, as we see it and practice it today, it's been around for forever. And they're very surprised to find out that actually there's been a constant evolution in points that our ancestors didn't have a problem with. I mean, they're far more active in their lifestyles. I mean, working in the field, farming, that was the main way of making for a living. So this is one aspect. So asana practice develops in response to this sense of lack that we have. So we come to the mat and we want to do more to become more flexible. And how on earth do you develop flexibility within your joints if not trying to move that joint through its full range of motion? And everyday driving won't take your joints through their full range of motion. So you find a way to compensate, for that through other kinds of physical activity. And this is just one aspect. You also